Alright, algebra students, today we're going to have a lesson on properties of real numbers. So you don't have to write down all of this here, just write down the title and then we'll go through each one of these. So get out your notebook, you're taking notes on these, and you want to write down all the rules and examples. And it is a lot of notes, but it's good for you to learn these. Property is the associative property, and the associative property has to do with grouping, and it says here it doesn't matter how you group or associate addition or multiplication, the answer will always be the same. So I don't know if this this is cut off in mine, so I don't know if it is in yours there. There we go. So the rules. The associative property of addition, the rule is that if you have a problem, you have A plus B in parentheses plus C, it's the same thing and it equals A plus B plus C. So notice that the parentheses, the numbers are in the same order, but the parentheses have changed. So that's the associative property of addition. The example they give you over here in the example is 1 plus 2 with parentheses around the 1 and the 2. That means you would do those first. 1 plus 2 plus 3 is the same thing as 1 plus parentheses 2 plus 3. This property also applies to multiplication. And multiplication, you can multiply and group differently and you'll still get the same answer. So A, B, C, if you multiply A and B together and then multiply C, it's the same thing as multiplying B and C together first and then multiplying A. The example they give you over here, you want to write this down. 2 plus 3, that's 6. 6 times 4 is 24. That's the same thing as 3 times 4, which is 12, and 12 times 2 would give me 24. So either way, you're going to get 24 for both of these. Okay, next property is the commutative property. The commutative properties is where order doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you swap addition or multiplication around, the answer will be the same. For example, the commutative property of addition, A plus B, is the same thing as B plus A. Also with multiplication, A times B is the same thing as B times A. And examples that they give you, over here you want to write the examples down. So 1 plus 2 is the same thing as 2 plus 1. Same thing with multiplication. 2 times 3 is 6 is the same thing as 3 times 2. And that's called the commutative property. And your job is going to be able to identify which properties are being used. So let's go. Alright, let me see if I can fix this. Alright, so now we have a question for you, and that is, does the associative property hold true for subtraction and division? So is it true? The associative property, remember, has to do with grouping. So if we subtract using this property, let's look and see what we get. So we have 5 minus 2 minus 3. You want to write that down. Is that equal to 5 minus, in parentheses, 2 minus 3? So let's use order of operations to see. So 5 minus 2 is 3, and 3 minus 3, that's going to give me 0. Let's look over here. Let's do the parentheses first. 2 minus 3, well, that's a negative 1. And 5 subtracting a negative 1 is going to be 6, because keep, change, change. So the associative property does not apply to subtraction. Let's see if it applies to division. So if we have 6 divided by 3, and then we subtract 2, 6 divided by 3, you do the parentheses first, is 2, and 2 minus 2 would be 0. Is that the same thing as, here we have parentheses around the 3 minus the 2, so you do that first. 3 minus 2 is 1, 6 divided by 1 is going to be 6. So the associative property does not hold true for division and subtraction. Let's check the commutative property. So for the commutative property, let's see if it works with subtraction and division. So in subtracting, now remember commutative means that we just move the numbers around. So is 5 minus 2 the same thing as 2 minus 5? Well, that's obvious. 5 minus 2 is 3, and 2 minus 5 is negative 3. So that does not work. Same thing with division. Is 6 divided by 3 the same thing as 3 divided by 6? No, it's not. 6 divided by 3 is 2, and 3 divided by 6, well, that's 1/2. So the bottom line is this: properties of real numbers are only for addition and multiplication. They do not work for subtraction and division. Okay, so the next properties you need to know about are called inverse properties. Inverse means the opposite. So what is the opposite or inverse of addition? Well, that would be subtraction. What is the opposite of multiplication? That would be division. So for the rule is the inverse property of addition, write that down. If you have a number a and you add the opposite of that number, which is a negative a, you would get 0. An example of inverse property of addition over here, 3 plus a negative 3 makes 0. All right, the inverse property of multiplication, remember multiplication, we're multiplying. If you take a number a and you multiply it by its reciprocal, 1 over a, you would get 1. An example over here of this one is 2 times 1/2 is equal to 1. So just a reminder on how to do that. 2 times 1/2. Remember, you multiply the top times the top and the bottom times the bottom, so you get 2 over 2, which is 1. Any number multiplied by its reciprocal will always be 1, and that's called the inverse property of multiplication. All right, let's move on. Identity properties. All right, so identity properties has to do with adding a number, like what can you add to a number and get the same number back? Well, that's always 0. What can you multiply by a number and get the same number back? And that's 1. So here are the 2 rules that you should write down. The rule for the identity property of addition is any number a plus 0 will always give you a. Very simple. 3 plus 0 is 3. You know this already, but now you just need to make sure you can identify that property when you see it. The identity property of multiplication is take a number a, multiply it by 1, and you'll still get the same number a. An example would be here. 2 times 1 is 2. And the next property is zero property of multiplication. And that just states that if you multiply a number by 0, you get 0. You just need to, again, you know this property, but you need to be able to identify it. So any number a multiplied by 0, you always get 0. 3 times 0 is 0. All right, now for the fun one, distributive property. Distributive property. If something is sitting just outside a set of parentheses, you can distribute it through the parentheses with multiplication and remove the parentheses. You want to write that down. So here's the rule. The rule is a multiplied by b plus c is the same thing as a times the b. Remember, we did this last year. So a times the b, which is here, and a times c, I'm sorry. Oh, I see a mistake here. This should be an a. So don't write b there. So this a is being multiplied by b, and then the a is being multiplied by c. So let's just make sure you have this right. So this is a times the b plus a times the c. And that's called the distributive property because you're taking what's on the outside and you're distributing it along the inside. Let's look at these examples and hope that they're right down here. All right, example. 4 times 3 plus 2 is the same thing as taking the 4 and multiplying it times the 3, then taking the 4 and multiplying it times the 2. You would get 12 plus 8 is equal to 20. And you can check that over here because 3 plus 2 is 5. 4 times 5 would be 20. So you get 20 either way you go. Then the fun thing that we're going to do again this year is to do this distributive property with your variables. So write this problem down. 2 parentheses x plus 3. This means 2 times x plus 3. So you take the 2 and you multiply it times the x, you get 2x, and a 2 times the 3 and you get 6. And you can't do anything else with that because that has a variable in the problem. Here's another one, and this one you'll see quite a bit. You have a negative on the outside, and then you have 3 plus x on the inside. So this is called distributing a negative. You have to, actually, all you have to do is add a 1. So what you would do is you would add, instead of making that just a negative to make it look a little bit better, you would have a negative 1 multiplied by 3 plus 6. So you're going to take the negative 1, remember this is called distributing a negative, multiply it by each term. So a negative 1 times 3 makes negative 3, and a negative 1 times x makes a negative x. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in class. Okay, so now I want you to do some practice. So I want you to write down each of these problems, 8 problems, and tell me what kind of property is being used. And then we will check your work in class. But I'm actually going to give you we'll check your work in class. So make sure you have these 8 things written down so that you know what kind of property they are. All right, after this, what I'm going to do after you come to after you finish this, and you can do this in class, you're going to log on to My Big Campus and you're going to check for schoolwork, and you're going to have a notes quiz over this lesson, and you are to follow the directions given. So make sure that you have your notes with you in class because you will be given a quiz that you can use your notes for. Okay? And we will do that in class. So great. Have a great day.